So hi, my name is Melissa Mills. This is a Literacy Strategies PD. Okay, so literacy or literature-based reading strategies. This is more so targeted for middle school and high school students. So, young adults can be hard to motivate to read, right? So here's some strategies that can help your students to love reading and to become better readers. Here's an overview of what we're going to look at today. Book talks, give options and choices, required reading time, book clubs, and set goals. So let's go ahead and begin. Let's look at book talks. So you may have heard about book talks before. They are not a book review. There's some big differences between the two. A book talk is more so it's like a movie trailer, but for a book that you make or your students make. So, and it needs to be done both by the teacher and by the students to help motivate their peers to read as well. So, it should be a way to give a students a hook to a story. According to Bond, a book talk typically involves introducing the book and why it is compelling to read without revealing too much about the plot. So you don't want to give away the endings or any good parts about it, but you want to get kids enticed into reading it. So, and like you can do it not just on one book, but you can do it at different times or at the same time. So, and they can vary in length. I mean, you don't want to make them really, really long because you're going to lose the kids' attention, but you don't want to make them too short to where you're not really grabbing their attention enough either. So, let's look at an example of a book talk. Here's a video I'm going to pull up. This is a lady that does them. Hers are 30 minutes long.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the 30-second book talk, the place where book talks stop being long-winded and start getting real. This is the place where I tell you about a new book that I'm reading that I'm loving in 30 seconds or under. Today's pick, Shadow Magic by Joshua Kahn. Get your stopwatches synchronized. Here we go. Lily is the last remaining survivor of the Shadow family, a long line of royals who command the powers of dark magic. When her family is murdered, Lily is made queen. Unfortunately, her country is failing and weak, and even if she could figure out how to use dark magic, women and girls are strictly prohibited from practicing it. And a little magic would be great about now. Someone in her court is trying to kill her. Thorn, meanwhile, is a peasant boy who was captured by slave traders while out searching for his missing outlawed dad. He's sold to Tyburn, an executioner who works for House Shadow. All Thorn wants to do is find his dad and get home. Soon Lily and Thorn are thrown together in this epic fantasy adventure that's action-packed and features giant bats, the undead, mistaken identities, and, surprisingly, a good amount of humor as well. This is a new series that's perfect for fans of Rick Riordan, Angie Sage, and Brandon Mull. This is Shadow Magic by Joshua Kahn. Till next time, everyone. Happy reading.
Okay, so that was a really short book talk, and it was pretty good. So, some elements that you have to have in a book talk are you have to say what the title and the author are to begin, and then you start in by giving a little bit of information about the characters, kind of like the prologue of a story or of a movie, and you kind of give like a little bit of action in there or in depth about what's going on with the characters that makes you want to read it. And then at the end, you always want to leave them hooked. Maybe leave an open-ended question for them to think about, and maybe want them to go and find the answer on their own. And you can also say again what the title's name was at the end, and make sure to show what the book looks like, because you know that always convinces some of us right there. So that's a book talk. You can use them for just about any grade level. The teacher can do it just like that librarian did that we just saw, or the students can do it for each other as to the class, or they can even record it like that and then show it, just in case they don't want to get up in front of people or to show other kids from then on. So I really do like book talks. Book talks are something that are becoming in popularity, and they are in our book, in the literature and the young adult reader that I mentioned by Bond. They're really gaining in popularity, and they can be done on nonfiction books or fiction like that. It just depends on how you want to structure it. But really, really great resource there. So another one is give options. So kids want options. And it's a little bit different than choices by this. Options mean like your selection of libraries and your of books in your libraries may just consist of fiction or just nonfiction. Kids like variety, like graphic novels, picture books even, dramas, and then of course the fiction and nonfiction. So according to Bond, after exploring picture books, college students that he was working with need no further convincing because they have found several books that they really enjoyed for the story, the art, and the unique narrative that these elements create together. So, and even in your book talks, going back to that, you can incorporate not just one genre but different kinds to kind of expose your students to different things. That's really important because they're going to pick up on what they're exposed to, not just what they find on their own. So giving option is really, really important. If you don't expose them sometimes, then they'll never be exposed to it. So some examples of that are just having different formats in your classroom, displaying them. You have to remember that there's different interests of your students and different needs. Say you have a student that's more of an audio learner. You may want them reading the audiobooks instead to help them. Or they're a struggler reader and that would help them more. Or say they're more of a visual learner and they really learn more from like the graphic novels and things. So just having an array of options that pertain to your students' interests is really, really important, and it leaves them with great exposure. Let's go into the next one, giving choices. So this one's a little bit different. So we all know that a lot of our programs have set books that they want our students to read in this amount of time, yada yada. So that's kind of boring, and students don't really get exposed so much more than what's in the program, what's set for them, and who wants to read something that's picked out already for them. So students need to be able to choose what interests them. Otherwise, they won't be interested in reading. It only makes sense. So, according to Bond, the very idea that people might read for pleasure is a foreign concept for many teens, and it will remain so unless they encounter books that are relevant to them. So that's kind of sad in a way, but it's very true, that they may never experience pleasure, may never even know that people read for pleasure unless they get to choose to do that. They may just think that it's a chore or something that they have to do, and who's going to do it later on for choice. So an example of that is pretty obvious. Do you like being told what to read? No, our students don't either. So let them have a variety and choice. Let them go out and choose. I mean, they are young adults. They're in that stage where they want choice in their life and what they want. So that's really a big important thing that sometimes gets overlooked. Another point is required reading time. So this is just a set amount of time each day just for reading. Can kind of sound obvious, but it's overlooked too sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too. So pretty much this can be like 20-30 minutes a day required just for reading. You can use like I said earlier, your different resources, but just making students read. So if you just say, oh, get these many points or tests done by this amount of time, if you're not providing that time for your students, then they may never get the time at home or anything like that. So according to Miller, providing SSR time might give your students time in a busy world to apply what you teach, and it might be their only chance to really fall in love with reading. So, like I said, they may not get that time anywhere else, or may not have the time management skills to make themselves do it at home, or whatever the reason may be. So, making them sit down and actually read is going to be a little bit of torment for both you and the students at first, but it may actually give them time to really give their own self time to sit down and try to read or try to enjoy reading. So an example of that would just vary depending on your classroom. I would say about 20 to 30 minutes. I know it's a huge time gap that we do not want to give, but it's really, really important. I mean, we can't expect our students to read on their own time if we don't help provide that time too. And that also tells them that it's really important and that we're giving up this amount of time just for them to read. So it must be something pretty significant. So that's really important. Like I said, the time just depends on you and your classroom time with your students. And you might could even do it during like lunch if you want your kids to come in after they're done eating, they have extra time, they want to come eat or come read, or even if they get to school early and they want to come read. So it can be done different ways. Very flexible there. Book clubs. Uh-oh. So a book club is giving book reviews and possibly a craft. So I've seen book clubs done very different ways in very different settings. I student taught in a second grade classroom, and I saw book clubs where each kid read a book and then they made a craft and came and gave the whole class the review of the book and then showed their craft. And and that kind of made the other students want to read that book too. And it left them with that mental reminder of that craft. Oh, I remember that craft that she made for that book, or what he made for that one. That must be really a good book. So that kind of helps students too to want to enjoy reading. For your older kids, since we're going over middle school and high school, book reviews can be done a little bit different. You don't necessarily have to do the craft. I've seen it done at once. I've seen where the kids, like, say there's a group of 5 students. They're all required to read pages 1 through 20 tonight of a certain book. Well, the next day, they come back and they talk about what they read. They may have wrote down questions. They may have just wrote down notes or words that they didn't know. And then they just talk about it. And they kind of retell what they read and talk about it with each other. Really important there. So that way they can answer each other's questions and just review what they already read. So here is an example of that. We're going to watch a little snippet of it.
Book club is pretty much a group of middle school boys who meet every other Thursday. We read classic books, and it's a safe environment, and you just talk about the book.
A few years ago, Donna Tarleton, our middle school librarian, came up with the idea of the Classics Book Club, and the students meet during lunch a couple of weeks to discuss what they're reading.
Right now we're reading The Black Arrow. It's about 100 years old. It's hard because it's written old English, so it's complicated to read. You can discuss what you liked about it and what you didn't really like. You talk about the author a lot, like why he wrote it and like what inspiration was.
One of the reasons why we really support the reading of classic books is that it helps the students become more fluent readers of difficult text, that you become a better reader of difficult text by reading difficult text. The other major reason is that in reading classic texts is that there are going to be allusions to different characters and different stories all throughout our students' lives.
Okay, so there was that video. So that was an example of a book club done for middle school boys and for classic books. So you could change that, obviously. You wouldn't have to do classical books. You could let the students choose the books. If you have enough copies of all of them, they all read such and such pages that night, and then the next day they can come back and talk about it and say what they did like, what they didn't like, just like in the video, or questions they had, just talking it out. So usually in this age group, book clubs are more student-led. They can be teacher-led, but I really think it works best if it is student-led. That way they have. Okay, on to the next one. Setting goals. So students really do need to have a goal set to strive toward, something that they're keeping their eye on, that helps keep them motivated, and maybe even have an incentive when they do reach it. So this goal needs to be reasonable for them to meet, but not really, really easy that they meet right off the bat. So, and you may need to adjust them too for your students' grade level and ability level, especially if you have special ed students. I would obviously make theirs a little bit easier to meet, but that still kept them motivated. So, an example of this would be like for middle school students, maybe read like 5 books every 9 weeks, um, or have a certain book level for the whole year. I think shorter goals are a little bit better because students seem to think, oh, well, that's a really long time away. I can do that and I can do that later. Procrastinators. So I think shorter term works a little bit better, but it just depends on what you want to do. Or you can do like number of words read in a school year. And you're like once the students read or pass the test on a book, it'll tell you how many words they've read in all in the whole year. It just depends on your program. And like I said, you can adjust these for your students' abilities and grade level. But still, I think setting a goal, having something to work toward, is a very important concept. So here's the resources for everything that I've mentioned. I hope these reading strategies for literature will help your students love to read and to help get them past that point where they don't like reading.